Hi, my name is Andrew, also known as Drewscape. I'm a freelance illustrator. I work from my home studio here, as you can see, and I've been doing this for about 20 years since quitting my job as an art director in an advertising agency. So I do various kinds of illustrations for different clients. I do stuff for ad agencies, comics, for example, for the National University of Singapore. I do children's picture books and also editorial illustrations. So I have to adapt to all kinds of illustration styles, whether it be natural media or digital. But having to adapt to different styles all the time, I have to, or I get to learn new things all the time. Anyways, in this video, I thought I would show you the tools that I use most as an illustrator, as in my most essential tools, as well as the tools that are not so essential but fun, and I think they're nice to have. This will be different from Illustrator to Illustrator. So these are just what I think are essential to me. I think the first off would be my iPad here. I got the Pro version because I needed it to be powerful enough to handle bigger files, like with higher resolutions. I use it a lot because it's portable. I can bring it to a cafe or anywhere outdoors and do my work. And one of the best things I like about the iPad as an illustrator is that I can draw directly on the screen. On my iPad, I mainly use Procreate. It has all kinds of pens and brushes and mediums that simulate natural media, and some of them are pretty close to the real thing. I do have a bias toward natural media because I always feel like digital tools still can't replicate the same look and feel. So I don't favor doing an artwork completely digitally. But now and then I do because of time constraints, and doing artwork digitally gives me more control, and it's also easy to change things. This is one example, done for the National University Hospital's Sleep and Cognition Department. This was done completely digitally. But still, I don't like doing the planning on the iPad itself. I still prefer to do my thinking on paper with pencil. It is less distracting. The way I prefer to use Procreate is I plan stuff on paper, then do more detailed rough sketches on Procreate, print it out and ink over it with a real pen or brush, scan it back again, and then color it. I know it sounds really troublesome, but this is how I do the Sherlock Sam illustrations, a chapter book for kids. Or for my own personal comics, I would draw all the lines on paper with natural media, for example with a dip pen, and then scan it to bring it into my iPad, and then I would color it in Procreate. The thing is that although Procreate can simulate a lot of these natural media lines, using real natural media still looks more natural to me. Maybe readers can't tell the difference or they don't care, but it does make a difference for me. Would you be able to tell the difference? I use a Mac Mini. It's pretty much covered with all these watercolor sets because I wanted the heat from the computer to heat it up, and I think that prevents mold from developing on my watercolor. But anyway, I use a Mac Mini. I used to use an iMac with the screen, everything integrated as one, but the screen always wears out first. So I thought this time I would just get this CPU here and I would get a separate screen. Hopefully this setup would make this computer last longer. On my computer, I pretty much use Photoshop. Although it can do similar things to Procreate, this gives me a much bigger screen, and somehow it's easier for me to work on small details. There's Adobe Illustrator. Although I don't use it that much, now and then a client would need me to do an illustration in the vector format, so this comes in handy. And I'm also able to convert a drawing into vectors using the image trace function. And Illustrator does it really well. And also InDesign. Although I mainly draw the pictures, there are times where I do have to work on the layouts as well. Like for this project where everything on the page was interconnected, from the picture to the words to how the pictures would be laid out on the page. Over the years, I think it's essential that I have a sketchbook. This is just an A5 one, which I try to carry around almost everywhere I go, even during lunchtime. And this is where I practice, and I don't care whether it turns out nice or not. The whole point is to try new things to see what works, what doesn't in terms of style or art principles, or what art mediums would work with other mediums, supposing if I were to mix them. For example, there is a difference between a matte pencil and a shiny pencil, and oil pencils or waxy pencils. They just mix differently. And I would also experiment with natural media. This is with Neocolor 2 wax pastels. And I would practice doing a finished version digitally to see how it would look. So this is good training for when I actually do a picture book. Because when a picture book project comes in, it's probably too late to start practicing and upping my skills. So I find that it's good to keep warmed up and keep practicing my skill before a project comes in, so I'll be ready. And then I would have more confidence to apply what I tried out here. Like for example, I was trying oil pastels and watercolor and color pencils together in one picture to see how it would work and what effect I could achieve. Having a sketchbook helps me to keep my skills sharp, and it's also a way to relax with art at the same time keep learning new things. One of the things that has become really essential for me is having a notebook. And I know it's pretty easy to have notes on the phone, but there's something nice about writing notes on paper, maybe because it gets me away from the screen and distractions. So I like to go to a cafe, buy coffee, and just sit down and just write. And just let my thoughts fill up the page and slowly plan out what I would teach at a workshop at school. And this is where I plan the ideas for the sleep comic that you saw just now. I'll plan it here first before I would draw it on the iPad. And I'll also draw it really small so that I will not be spending so much time in the detail. This is just to really get the bare bones idea. And then on the iPad, I would slowly flesh out the visual details. I write my YouTube ideas here too. Oh yeah, I used to use a smaller notebook, but these days I like to use an A4 notebook because I think it's just a lot more space and I just feel like I have more brain space to think. For me, what makes writing more pleasurable is having a nice pen to write with. It's hard to say which one's my favorite pen because a pen that I like to use keeps changing all the time. Personally, for writing and drawing as well, I do like the Sailor 1911 pen with a zoom nib. I've mentioned this pen quite a number of times in my videos. This is not a cheap pen, it's about at least more than $100. It has a gold nib and it has a specially designed nib, and it allows me to have line variation depending on the angle I draw or write. I also seem to use this quite a bit. This is a Ranga fountain pen made in India and is completely made from ebonite. If you care about aesthetics, this would be nice, but function-wise, that's not the important thing. Basically, what I like about it is that it's also really juicy in terms of releasing ink. So this is an eyedropper, so I can fill the whole barrel with ink. But I would say that the aesthetics also plays a part in making me want to take it out, hold it, and use it. Another kind of pen that I use quite often is this disposable gel pen, and this is also a broad pen, it's 1mm. I take it around when I don't want to bother about making sure that my expensive pen doesn't drop on the floor or get lost. It doesn't feel as pleasurable to hold, it feels a bit cheap, but performance-wise it produces really nice lines. This is a pen you probably can find in almost any stationery store here. And this one has waterproof ink, so it's great for drawing. But if I'm just writing notes, I think I still prefer my Sailor or my Ranga pen. But note that there is a chance that you might go overboard with fountain pens because they can be pretty addictive as I have found. My most expensive pen, the Nakaya fountain pen, it's certainly nice to have, but not essential. I hardly take it out with me because it's too precious. As an illustrator, I find that it's essential to try out all kinds of line styles, and dip pen nibs allow me to do just that. They're pretty much inexpensive. I bought quite a number of dip pen nibs over the years. The one that I use quite often is the G-nib, which is a favorite among mangaka in Japan, I believe. To use it, I have to insert it into a pen holder. The metal thing that comes with pen holders tend to get rusty, so I've replaced it with this stiffer plastic that I got from a mineral water bottle. Just any stiff plastic, roll it up, and it does the trick too. So I place the nib in it and then dip it in ink. And it gives flexible lines like this, from thin to thick. There's so many kinds of dip pens I could use. There's even this bamboo pen made of bamboo and comes out with this more organic line just by tilting it at different angles. I do like this Tachikawa tank nib. It comes with this reservoir which helps to hold more ink. It needs a holder that can fit the smaller size. I just dip it in ink, the ink collects in the reservoir, and it allows me to draw for longer periods between dips. I think this one is brand new, so I think it needs to be warmed up a bit, but pretty much it can almost fill a whole page with one dip. And it's also flexible, so it has line variation. It's similar to a mapping pen. And there's also this steel brush, which is a brush but made of metal. And it gives me this very unpredictable, almost uncontrollable line. I've not used it for client work, but it's really fun to produce art with it in my sketchbooks. Each kind of line has a different voice, and learning to use each kind of line helps me to match it with different stories and projects that I work on. It's kind of like casting the right actor to fit a movie. So all these different kinds of lines are great for playing around in my sketchbooks, and I always find that it's amazing how just changing the kind of line can change the whole look of a drawing. Sure, some of these lines can be replicated digitally and some can't. But having ink and nib scratching over paper somehow gives me this excitement and urgency to get it right the first time or leave flaws as they are. So it seems to force my brain to think differently, and the outcome is often very different from when I simulate a dip pen line digitally. So I wouldn't say that digital lines can replace real dip pens for me. My go-to inks are Winsor & Newton Indian ink for dip pens if I want a really black ink. And for fountain pens, a good black is platinum carbon black, which is waterproof. Nowadays, I'm learning how to use other colored inks. For a non-waterproof ink, I sometimes use this Japanese ink. And these are my most useful brushes if I were to narrow them down. I use this very thin sable brush. I use it for the lines for the Sherlock Sam chapter book illustrations. A thin sable brush like this is about $10, maybe. It gives me great line variation, and these brushes always spring back to a sharp point. I also have a big brush. It's hard to fill a big area of wash with a small brush, so this big brush is really useful. When I'm drawing outside of my house, I find the Pentel water brush really useful because I don't have to hold a cup of water with me. Less chance of making a mess when I'm drawing in a car, in a bus, or on a sofa. It has synthetic hair, so some artists don't like how it releases water. It's true, it's not as good as a real brush. So for going out, I like to use this Escoda travel brush, size 12, because it's really big, but also it has a really sharp point. This is synthetic hair, but the quality of this hair, it's really close to real hair. So I have a big travel brush, and I also use a smaller travel brush for smaller details. This is my watercolor set in a medicine tin for diarrhea. I just like the tin. I know my watercolor set is terribly, horribly messy, but it works. I've also this other set. Keeping it small, I only have space for a limited color palette, and sometimes that's great because it makes choosing colors a little simpler. So here I have Payne's Gray, Burnt Sienna, I can't remember what red is this, Cerulean Blue, Transparent Yellow, and Ultramarine Blue. I use watercolors more for everyday practice in my sketchbooks because it's so convenient to use. When it comes to doing picture books, I find that acrylic and gouache are great options. The paint and the texture and the colors usually look more bold and full. And for acrylics, it's easy to cover over errors because it's opaque. I use different brands of acrylics, and these are my gouache paints. This is Talent's brand. But before I use these more pricey gouache, I've also used these simple and inexpensive Pentel poster colors, and it worked fine too. Because I'm not putting these pictures in a gallery for display, I'm just painting them out and then scanning them to be printed in a book, so I don't have to really worry about light fastness. For digital brushes and paints that look the most like natural media, I like to use these Procreate brush sets by Lisa Glantz. This is great for a picture book look. And these are great for texture stamps, although I probably can make these on my own. These are pretty nicely made and I've used them quite often. And oh yes, color pencils. This is kind of something I discovered just a few years ago. Color pencils work great together with thicker paints. So I see it like food, where some parts of the food is soft and creamy and other parts of the food is crunchy. So the thicker paints feel more creamy and smooth, and the color pencil lines provide the crunchy bits. So that's how I explain how they look good together. As for regular pencils, I only use them for rough planning work, and I'll just use a 2B pencil. I usually use something that feels a bit nicer to encourage me to do my work, so I would use a Blackwing pencil. And yes, I really like these Staedtler Lumigraph black pencils. They are matte, and so if I use them in a painting and I scan them, it would not reflect the scanner light. So just by wanting to do natural media, it is a bit more troublesome. I need to scan my work, and so I need a scanner. Nowadays scanners tend to come with the printer, so I use a scanner here. And a printer is pretty useful when I'm checking how a layout looks like in actual size. And that was really useful when I was preparing my book, The Ollie Comics, for publication. I needed to see how big my text would be so that I could determine the book size. Here are a few more essentials. And these are more nice to have stuff. I don't know if this will look old-fashioned nowadays, but it's useful for tracing stuff. For example, if I do a very messy rough drawing and I erase and try to get it right, and then I want to do a really slow final line with natural media, this is how I would do it. And of course, you want to make it a bit more loose you do have to not try to be too perfect, and you can still change things as you trace. I used this a lot when I was doing the Sherlock Sam book illustrations, especially the first few books. But nowadays I skip the light box by printing my rough drawings out in blue ink using my printer. So you do need a printer, and then inking over, and then I scan it back into Photoshop, and in Photoshop I can remove all the blue lines, leaving just the black lines. So with this process, I don't need a light box and avoid having light shining into my face, which can be a bit uncomfortable. But having said that, light box is more simple. Gosh, that's a lot of stuff already, but I think I've covered the essentials. Probably. So I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.